why is the benefit using poverty line? This is basically a decision that that we made. We've discussed also earlier when we did the assumptions for the scenarios. There's several options actually, but the poverty line was considered the amount that you need to survive in a normal life. So we use that as a parameter. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for the presentation. I think it was very clear. I think it really helps us to understand like the principle of the RAP and everything. What I would like to do is maybe to emphasize on one aspect. This aspect is like, when do we use the RAP? Because I think it was well explained in the beginning that we have a range of tools, of models that is possible. And this RAP, I would say, is mainly used at the beginning of the policy discussion, right? Because you have two options. The first option is you go to a meeting, you try to convince people empty-handed with no numbers. Or the other option is to use this RAP, and then at least you have like something tangible. You have like real data. And you will not be able to be turned down by someone saying it's not affordable. You will be able to back up your idea with some basic numbers. And this tool is very helpful. And you will see that by very simple mathematics, you will be able to reach the objective and have something concrete. It's not perfect, but it's still something very useful in the process. What I would like to mention is like, and then you will come to the next step. When you actually engage a bit more in the policy discussion, and then that you refine a little bit your idea what you want to achieve with your social protection system, but then you will also have to refine the way you do projection. You will take, and this is a very good starting point, but then you will take this further. You'll break down your assumptions, you will try to actually model a number of factors that will make your model more effective and more, I would say, correct to be in line with reality. But there's also some limitation, especially when we're in the field of new social protection system. There's very few, I would say, references that you could actually anchor your model because the scheme does not exist. So you cannot look at historical data for it because they don't exist. So when you will move from this generative model into something more tailor-made to your country, be aware that you will also not be able to do a very sophisticated model because the scheme does not exist. So you will need to make a model which will be in line with the data and the reality of your scheme. So I would say there's one model which will be different at different step of your policy debate. And that's very interesting to see how this kind of model is progressing over years. If you look at like existing schemes that have been in place for a number of years, you will see the transition. So I would say it's very interesting. I think we should take this as a starting point, something that should be tailor-made more to your national needs. And that's something that will be constant improvement if you're serious about promoting the one of the options that you have under your scenario. So, but thanks for your presentation. Very good.
I have questions about the populations. Like in Vietnam, we also population projection, especially in age group like this. How can we project it in different levels of age? It is done by the Excel.
Projection of
from age group to the different age.
Okay. In the case of Indonesia, luckily there has already been a projection for each group. So when you need certain age brackets, you just need to add, for instance, 0 to 5. But maybe you can explain the ILO.
Yeah. So I think generally population projection is done by single age, yeah? So where you have actually the mortality rates for each age group, and then you move each age cohort from 1 year to the next, and you, depending on the mortality, people, age cohorts decrease, yeah? That's the cohort component model, I think it's called, yeah? So usually maybe they don't publish the single age data, but I'm sure in Vietnam they do it in the same way, or probably do it in the same way.
In Thailand, we faced the same problem as Vietnam, because it's published only per age group, and then I think it's a statistical office based on the census, who tries to convert that into single age. But actually, if you look at the cohorts, there are some problems. Yeah. For instance, the children from 1 year old in 2001, they should decrease a little bit because of the mortality, and there's migration is considered as zero in this model because it's only the population of Thailand, the Thai. But actually, sometimes it's increasing. Yeah. So. I mean, when you convert, you use the official data, and there is this conversion from age groups of 5 years of age to single age. Sometimes there are problems, yeah? But you need to use this data, yeah?
Yes, I mean, that's always a tricky question, yeah? Do we use official data, or can we use alternative data? I mean, like, for example, the IMF projections, that economic projections that we often use, but sometimes they are not in line with the national ones. So then it's, I mean, it's a decision to take. You know, what kind of data can we use, or should we use? Especially if the data we find is not necessarily consistent.
There's some mathematical formula that you could use. The ILO would use the Sprague formula that will actually spread your age group, but also considering different age groups, so you have a kind of a smooth curve. So that's kind of mathematical things that you could do. Huh? But you might be surprised that the UN is actually doing projection by single age for each of the countries. So each of the country in this classroom, if you go online, information is free, is available. You will have the UN estimation of like your age structure by single age for 50 years, the 250 years projection. Each country. Each country. It doesn't mean that the UN is always right, but at least it gives you a very good comparison base. And you could maybe use the age structure that you have online, and then you use your group age, and then you do some kind of mix between the two. So there's many ways to go around and to produce the single age metrics.
With the UN data, I cross-checked it, and it seems that the national data that we have was more updated, so we decided to use this one, but it is available for each age group.
Yeah, how did you, under total benefit 2013, I don't quite understand, 13.5 times 12, am I right? Your asterisks are multiplication, am I right? Then what is 1.012? Is that where did that number come from? 1.012, is it your pop growth? So it should be 1.2 or 1.0?
Sorry, that should be 202,400. That should be the number of population already, not the population growth. Sorry.
That's why I couldn't figure out. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, in some countries, like in Thailand, there are different scenarios, macroeconomic scenarios. An optimistic, a pessimistic, and a more or less, yeah. And therefore, we can do 3 types of assumptions and therefore results. Is it? It's not the case in Cambodia?
In Cambodia, actually we use the IMF projections, and then we extrapolated a little bit, I mean, for the last years. I think the IMF projections, they run up to 2016, so that was just the last 4 years where we extrapolated the same trend. No, it's a bit tricky. If we use, and we do that a lot, the pension modeling, we have an optimistic and pessimistic scenario, especially when you look at the really long-term projections, like 50 years or so. That's where, I mean, you can really go wrong, yeah, when you use the same, when you use the wrong assumptions. But it is something to be considered, you know, that to use different sets of assumptions. And we get kind of a confidence interval, yeah, where how the cost could evolve over the projection period.
Your ratio might be going down from 2 to 0.0 something, which shows you affordability over time. But who decides that that ratio is lower, right?
I mean, that's a very good question. I mean, that's obviously up to the government of Cambodia to decide if the cost is too high or too low. Yeah, it's and this depends also on the so-called, I mean, fiscal space. Yeah, is there any room for extending the programs or funding some of these programs that are being considered? The longer we look into the future, the more difficult it gets. I mean, to take into account like small variations, and often, you know, it's just a trend. Now, for the short-term future, for example, we might have some GDP figures, and we can project the labor force, so we can project productivity, yeah, or so. But the longer you go into the future, the more difficult it is. Yeah. Now, I also have to say that in our model, we do not look at things like the business cycle. Yeah? I mean, that's difficult to project. Yeah? So we just look at the general trend, and that's something that's coherent. I mean, the relationship between the different variables is